I'll get straight to the point. My middle son is currently a senior in college. He's a good kid most of the time. But right now, I'm a little irritated with him. Earlier today, he asked me for money so he could go on a spring break trip to Hawaii with his friends, and honestly, that request caught me completely off guard. Like I said, he's a good kid, and I want him to enjoy life. But something about the way he asked just didn't sit right with me. His mother has been struggling with her mental health lately, and it really would have meant a lot to her if he stayed around for a while. But it seems like he's more focused on getting drunk on a beach somewhere with his frat brothers. To be fair though, I can't even fully blame him. When I was his age, I was pretty much the same. Sometimes when I look at him, I see a lot of my younger self. That whole conversation got me thinking about my own college years. It brought back a memory I honestly hadn't thought about in a very long time. And that memory turned into the story I'm about to tell. Funny enough, my son is actually the one who introduced me to this page. So if this ever gets read out loud here, maybe he'll hear it and get a laugh out of it. I went to Wharton, class of '85, something I'm still incredibly proud of. Back then, and even now, it's considered the most prestigious business school in the world, and I always took that reputation seriously. Sure, I had my fun like everyone else, but I also worked extremely hard. Things were different in those days. Some of my classmates were absolutely wild, like Wolf of Wall Street level wild. I always tried to keep my distance from that kind of lifestyle, but during my junior year, I did something a bit impulsive. At the time, I was dating a Puerto Rican girl named Maria Muniz. I remember her very fondly. Sometimes I catch myself wondering how different my life might have been if I had chosen to take things further with some of the women I dated back then. Maria was definitely one of them. Normally, I would go back home for spring break. But that year, Maria convinced me to travel with her to Puerto Rico so I could meet her extended family. It was my first time ever visiting the island, and I really wanted to impress her, so I agreed without thinking twice. That being said, I was extremely nervous. I didn't want to mess anything up. Maria used to joke about how open and close knit Puerto Rican families were, so I already knew they had heard quite a lot about me before I even arrived. Luckily, most of my anxiety turned out to be unnecessary. When I finally met her family, everything went smoothly. I got along with them surprisingly well, and it genuinely seemed like they liked me. Most of the trip was spent visiting different relatives and getting to know them. But we still managed to make time for a few little adventures of our own. After all, it was spring break. One of those little adventures was a hike through El Yunque, which, fun fact, is the only tropical rainforest in the U.S. National Forest System. Neither of us had a car, of course, so Maria's mother drove us and dropped us off at one of the most popular trailheads in the forest. The two of us were a bit mischievous back then, so we definitely took advantage of the fact that neither of us had to drive. Our plan was simple: hike through the rainforest, enjoy the scenery, and secretly sip some rum we had packed along with us. At first, everything seemed like it was going to be perfect. But almost immediately, we ran into a problem. The trail we were most excited to hike was closed. I honestly don't remember the exact reason. Maybe flooding, maybe maintenance. But I clearly remember how upset Maria was when she saw the sign. I tried to calm her down and told her it wasn't a big deal. The forest had plenty of other trails we could explore, but she wouldn't budge. She kept insisting that the trail we had planned to hike was basically the premier trail, and none of the others even came close. Personally, I couldn't understand how one hiking trail could be so much better than the rest, but she was completely convinced. And by that point, I had already learned that arguing with her about something like this was usually a bad idea. So instead, I simply asked her what she wanted to do. She looked at me for a moment, then casually said that we should just hike the closed trail anyway. Like I mentioned earlier, both of us had a bit of a rebellious streak back then. So when she suggested that idea, I didn't hesitate. We had already come all this way. If some rule was going to stop us now, no way. Maria looked at me with a certain expression, and honestly, that was all it took. We looked around carefully to make sure no one was nearby. Once we were certain the area was empty, we quietly slipped past the barriers and stepped onto the closed trail, laughing like a couple of complete idiots. At first, everything felt exactly the way we had imagined it, actually even better. It almost felt like the entire forest belonged to us. Considering how popular that trail usually was, the situation felt unreal. Just imagine visiting a famous natural place, but somehow you're the only people there. That kind of privacy almost never happens. We kept hiking for quite a while. Along the way, we passed small waterfalls, stopped to admire the thick green forest around us, and simply enjoyed the moment. And yes, we were drinking a little rum from the bottle we had brought. Not too much, just enough to feel a light buzz and keep the mood fun. Honestly, it was a great time. But then everything suddenly changed. Out of nowhere, Maria screamed and jumped backward so fast she nearly knocked me off my feet. The sudden panic in her voice instantly put me on edge. I had no idea what had frightened her, but I immediately started looking around, trying to figure it out. And then I saw it. A little further down the path, something was lying on the ground. At first it didn't make sense, but as my eyes focused, the shape became clear. It looked like a mongoose, not just any mongoose either, it was a large one. And something about it was terribly wrong. Its head was gone. Yes, a mongoose. And its head looked like it had been completely removed from its body. I told Maria to stay exactly where she was while I slowly walked closer to it. Part of me was hoping it was some kind of fake animal or maybe a prop someone had left behind, but it wasn't. I didn't get too close, but I examined it carefully from a short distance. What I first suspected turned out to be true. The head had been cut clean off. The cut was so precise that it was impossible for it to be an accident. It looked like it had been done with a knife. That realization made the whole situation deeply disturbing. But the worst part came a second later. The body didn't smell yet, which meant the animal probably hadn't been there for very long. Maria was shaking badly at this point. I was still in shock myself, but she was clearly far more frightened. I tried to calm her down by saying something stupid about how crimes like that were unlikely to happen in a national forest. Truthfully, I had no real explanation either. I put my arm around her shoulders and gently guided her past the body, trying my best to block it from her view. The only thing on my mind at that moment was putting as much distance as possible between us and that poor lifeless animal. We walked for a while without saying much. Even though we had moved far away from where the mongoose was, I could tell the mood had completely changed. The rush of adrenaline had wiped out the small buzz I had from the rum, and my good mood had vanished. But as uneasy as I felt, Maria was clearly much more shaken. It didn't look like she was enjoying the hike anymore at all. She still said she wanted to stick with the original plan and continue hiking the trail all the way to the other side. But it was obvious she didn't want to be in that forest anymore. And honestly, I couldn't blame her. As we kept walking, my mind kept trying to make sense of what we had just seen. None of it added up. I didn't know the exact hunting rules in that area, but I found it hard to believe that hunting would be allowed in a national forest so close to a walking trail. Still, that was the only explanation I could think of. Maybe a hunter had taken advantage of the fact that the trail was closed and decided to use that part of the forest while no one else was around, just like we had. But why leave the body there like that? That part made no sense to me. Maria and I continued hiking for about another mile. The whole time I tried to lighten the mood and make her feel better, but nothing I said seemed to work. Finally, she admitted that she wasn't feeling well and wanted to turn back. I didn't argue at all. The truth was, I wasn't excited about walking past that spot again. Not because of myself, but because I was worried about how seeing it again might affect Maria. I just wanted her to feel safe and comfortable. So we started retracing our steps. As we walked back along the trail, I could tell we were getting closer to the place where we had seen the mongoose. My stomach tightened as we approached. I quietly told Maria to keep her head down so she wouldn't have to see it again. She nodded and did exactly that. We turned the final bend in the trail, and I braced myself for the sight. But when the spot finally came into view, the mongoose was gone. The body that had been lying there only a short time earlier had completely disappeared. Someone had moved it. My heart suddenly started pounding hard in my chest. Instinctively, I began looking around at the trees nearby, scanning every direction, terrified that someone might be hiding there watching us. But I wasn't ready for what I saw next. Instead of spotting a person, I noticed something hanging from one of the trees. At first, my brain struggled to understand what I was looking at. Then it became clear. It was the mongoose. The same mongoose we had seen lying on the trail earlier. Now it was hanging from a branch, tied up with a piece of twine. Its paws had been bound together, and its body was dangling in the air, slowly spinning in the breeze. But that wasn't the only disturbing thing. There was a thick green liquid dripping from its body. That liquid hadn't been there before. The sight was so disturbing that I instinctively cursed out loud. The moment I did that, Maria opened her eyes, and the second she saw what was hanging from that tree, she let out one of the most horrifying screams I have ever heard. It was pure terror. Before she had a chance to freeze in place, I grabbed her wrist and shouted at her to run. We immediately took off down the trail as fast as we could. We were practically tripping over each other in our panic. I pushed Maria slightly ahead of me and kept glancing back over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone chasing us. But instead of footsteps behind us, something else happened. From somewhere deep in the forest behind us, a scream suddenly echoed through the trees. It was loud, deafening, and it was clearly a woman's scream. The kind of scream someone makes when they're being attacked. The sound was so terrifying that Maria's body jolted while she was running. For a moment, I thought she was going to collapse right there. She let out a desperate sob and tried to force herself to run faster, but she was already completely out of breath. I tightened my grip on her wrist and kept pulling her forward as she started slowing down. Stopping wasn't an option. My own chest felt like it was on fire from running, but we had to keep moving. After a while, Maria could barely run anymore, so we were forced to slow down to a fast walk. I turned my whole body around and started walking backward, keeping my eyes fixed on the trail behind us. At that moment, I was mentally preparing myself for a fight. Something had hung that mongoose in the tree. Something had caused that terrifying scream. I was completely certain that at any second I would see someone charging toward us from the forest, but nothing appeared. Eventually, the trailhead came into view ahead of us. For a brief moment, I felt a wave of relief. I thought we had finally made it out safely, but then I noticed someone standing near the barricades watching us. It was a park worker. He had his arms crossed and looked clearly angry. The moment we slipped back past the barricades, he immediately started yelling at us for breaking the rules. He said we weren't supposed to be on that closed trail and that he was kicking us out of the park and banning us for life. But then he took a closer look at Maria. By that point, she was sobbing uncontrollably and looked completely exhausted. So I told him everything. I didn't leave out a single detail. To his credit, he took the situation very seriously. After hearing the story, he told both of us that we needed to come with him. We followed him without arguing. He took us to a small ranger station near the parking lot where a supervisor was already waiting. I had to explain the entire story again from the beginning, and then I had to repeat it once more when they called the police. Maria didn't say a single word during any of it. Eventually, her mother arrived to pick us up, and we left the area still shaken by everything that had happened. After that day, I never heard anything about what the authorities might have found. I don't even know if they fully investigated the situation. Maybe Maria's family heard something later, but I wouldn't know. We broke up the following summer, and after that we completely lost contact. For a long time, I didn't think about that experience at all. But even now, after all these years, the memory still feels just as unsettling as it did back then. And honestly, the most disturbing part of the whole thing wasn't even the mongoose. It was that scream, because during the entire time we were on that trail, we never saw another person. And to this day, I still have no idea who that scream belonged to.